You know how every best friend duo has their thing?
Some scrapbook, some bake. We share a Google search history the FBI would have questions about.
Welcome to Bloody Besties, the true crime podcast hosted by two lifelong friends with a questionable idea of what is light conversation and the emotional stability of a...
Back to the recap. This was the murder of Jatinder Singh. It happened September 26th, 2024. So here's the recap. He was found dead in the sleeper cab of his truck. He had been murdered. Police had tracked a white Mercedes that had been noted as following Jatinder's truck. They arrested the owner of that Mercedes, who was Jatinder Singh Dhillon. I'm sorry. I know I had that the first episode. I forgot to look it up a second time. Dhillon. So the update, I'm a little bit behind on this, but it happened November 20th. And it was Jatinder's ex-wife who was arrested for his murder as well. Her name is Jatinder. So we have a Jatinder, a Jaswinder, and a Jatinder, to keep things interesting. Jatinder, she was charged with his murder and kidnapping, and that was because evidence showed that she and Jaswinder had been in communication before, during, and after his murder. Further, they were in contact while he was in jail after he was arrested. And as we all know, jail calls are recorded, and the authorities heard them talking. While they were speaking in their native dialect, they got a translator, and they heard that they had been talking about their love for each other, and Jaswinder was saying he didn't know why he was the one to get arrested. And at the time of Jatinder's arrest, she had remarried to another man. They were raising Jaswinder and Jatinder's daughter together. And when police questioned this daughter, she said that her mother was very capable of killing her dad, and she had already gotten a restraining order against her mom. She was basically like, yeah, my mom was probably the one who organized the hit on my dad. Isn't that crazy? And that's the latest. I'm going to keep an eye on this and update you as I get info. Because like I just said, that'll happen November 20th, 2025.
So you think she hired a hitman?
So it was one of those things where they had a relationship. I mean, we see plenty of cases where the wifey sets it up. People say it's always the husband, but nope. All right. So back to our horse crimes. We are now in episode 3 of the series. Again, there will be 5. And thank you to Win Folks for dropping this one on me and sending me down that Alice rabbit hole that I love so much. And in case you guys were wondering why I keep saying that, it's because I am absolutely obsessed with Alice in Wonderland and zombies. And I actually have a zombie Alice in Wonderland tattoo, quite a large one, because I'm so obsessed. So when I say I fell down a rabbit hole, it has to do with that. All right. So today's topic that I gave Melissa May was horse stables.
Yes. So the fun fact we found about horse stables is that the largest one to be found was built for a pharaoh. His name was Pharaoh Ramses II in ancient Egypt around 3,300 years ago. These stables were the largest ever found, covering almost 183,000 square feet. It housed 480 horses at a time. They consisted of 6 rows of halls with sloping floors for drainage because the horses urinate a lot. I deal with that every day.
Oh, I didn't know that. I know that they pee copious amounts of fluid at a time, but I didn't realize that they actually pee all day. I know that's dumb.
Yeah. I'm thinking about putting a French drain in one of my horse's stalls because it's so bad in there.
Which one?
Echo. The gelding.
Oh, he's a big boy.
And then Aria just pees all around her stall, so there's just urine everywhere. It's not one big gross hole, it's her hole. So yes, we are working on that. But back to that, the halls had the slope floors for drainage, and they were divided into stalls for the horses. There was also a huge courtyard, which was probably used to exercise or training. So while you can't visit these stables today, the archaeological site exists and has provided incredible insight into ancient Egypt horsemanship and engineering. Still there, you just can't go see it.
I can't imagine that they would hold up that much. I'm assuming that they were made of wood and, wood degrades over time.
So I guess the capital used to be Do you remember the town it was in? But the capital used to be there in Egypt.
I mean, I know it's Cairo now.
Yeah. So before it was another place, and then the Nile was rising. So they moved the capital. And so when they moved it, these stables got taken apart as much as possible to reuse in the other area. So now it's pretty much covered with soot.
I didn't know any of that. That's pretty awesome. A fun fact that I never would have known otherwise.
Right.
So hopefully you listeners, which by the way, our listenership is growing. It's amazing. As you know, we are strictly on word of mouth because we're indies. So if you like us, rate us wherever you listen. Follow us on our socials. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I don't even know what else. Marketing Megan takes care of all of that. I don't even know. Alrighty. So we're just going to go ahead and get back into this. And now, do you remember where we left off on episode 2 with the pin, the final pin that I put in everything?
No, because there were so many areas, and I don't have a crime board up in my room.
It was Curtis Hanson. We left off on his pin, so I left you with a nice little cliffhanger. We're going to go back to December 1991 when a man named William Red, he went by Red, Wimett, he was looking at the Helen Brock investigation. Don't worry, we're going to come back to that case. Another pin. And he phoned the authorities to let them know that he had information about a different murder, that of 3 boys that happened in 1955. So we're just going to jump right into this. He was in the Federal Witness Protection Program in 1989 because he testified against a mob hitman.
Do you know what the Federal Witness Protection actually is?
I mean, I know that people get put into it and like they have to leave everything behind and make everybody think that they're dead? Question mark?
Like disappeared, yeah. The U.S. Marshals run it, and the purpose is to safeguard key witnesses and their families from retaliation for cooperating with the government against serious criminals. So you see a lot of this with gangsters, organized crime, terrorism. They are provided with new birth certificates, social security numbers, licenses, and other IDs. They're relocated to a new safe location far from their original homes. They receive financial aid for housing, living expenses, and they also help find them jobs to become self-sufficient, which I didn't know that part.
Well, isn't it true that they're not allowed to have their previous jobs because it would be too easy to find them? Like in my case, I'm a scientist, so if I got put into witness protection, I would not be able to have another job as a scientist because that'd be where to find me.
Huh. The responsibilities of people in witness protection. You have to testify against the criminals in court. Duh. But you have to cut ties with all your old contacts and stay off social media to prevent being found. And the Witness Protection Program claims to have a 100% sex rate.
Wait, sex rate?
Cut.
I'm not cutting that.
No, okay. 100% success rate if you follow the rules, meaning no one under active protection has been harmed for their testimony. I'm broken. So it says, however, some individuals who left the program or broke these rules have been located and murdered by former associates.
That's pretty crazy. Apparently, Red had no problem breaking these rules. He was in the program, like I said, since 1989, and he was an FBI informant from 1971 to 1989. He wrote a book about his trials called Nobody Cares What I Did About It. It's called The Red Wimett Story of the Chicago Outfit. He and his partner operated a pornography bookstore in Chicago, and he would wear a wire during conversations with the mobsters. He had 2 videos concealed in his apartment for these meetings. So when he wasn't at the store recording, he would call them to his apartment. They would have video recordings and everything. So they gathered enough evidence to convict Frank the German. I can't pronounce that last name. I should have looked it up. He was a mob hitman and an enforcer. And by testifying against him, he and his partner, Anthony Jeeps Dadino, were put into the Witness Protection Program. Red, this is going back to 1991, he said that he had lived with a man named Kenneth Hansen for years, and that Ken confessed to him that he had killed 3 boys back in 1955. He said that he had waited to tell the cops what he knew because he was terrified of Curtis Hanson. That's the pin from last week, Curtis Hanson. So he was Kenneth's brother and an associate of Silas Jane. Hey, see how we're all getting connected? He was waiting for Curtis to die before he felt safe enough to report about these murders. He said that he was not the only one who was waiting for Curtis to die before coming forward. We're just going to go into all the witnesses. It was October 16th, 1955, when 3 boys, Bobby Patterson, 14, and his friends John and Tony Schuessler, who were 13 and 11, they were headed down to see a movie called The African Lion. They were then seen leaving the Monte Cristo bowling alley around 8 p.m. that night, and there was a witness who stated that he saw Tony hitchhiking on Milwaukee Avenue between 8 and 9. That same night, a woman named Hetty Salerno said that she heard 2 screams coming from the Idle Hour stables between 9 and 10. And then a bus driver, Bruno Mancarini, told police that he dropped them off at 8:52 on the corner of Milwaukee and Lawrence. All of this is coming out. The boys were actually found 2 days later in a forest preserve near Norwich, which is by the Idle Hour stables. And you may remember this stable is the one that was owned by Silas Jane. Are they connected? Bobby, he was your typical 8th grader. He was rarely in trouble. And that night that they were last seen, the Schuessler boys had ridden their bikes to his house and they left for the movie around 3:15, 3:30. Bobby's parents started to get worried at 8 p.m. We're talking about the streetlights rule, where you got to come home when the streetlights come on, and you get in trouble if you're not.
I got in so much trouble. The one time I was playing with my older friends that lived in the condos, the blue condos, I didn't make it back in time, and I got my butt beat.
I believe it. John and Tony's parents began to worry as well. They went to report the boys missing that very night, and then they went out looking for them themselves. The police or the parents were the ones that found the boys, that they had gone to the bowling alley after the movie, and then the trail went cold. So 1 month after the murders, John and Tony's father died from a heart attack.
1 month?
They think it might have been one of those, what's it called?
Broken heart.
Yeah, that's the one.
1 month after? Dang. The both of them.
Dr. Edmund Donahue was the one to have performed the autopsies. He was an expert in the field of forensic pathology.
I love forensic pathologies people. Like, that's my favorite. They do the autopsies, and they also determine the cause of death and the manner of death. And then they collect the evidence, like the DNA and toxicological data. Big word. And then they have to testify, which I don't envy you. I don't envy people that have to testify as the expert witnesses. But that's what I know about forensic pathologists.
Yeah, in order to do that job, you have to be a medical doctor first.
12 years. 12 years.
Yeah, it's all the additional education for the forensic pathology. So not just any doctor can be one.
No, thanks. No.
Dr. Edmund Donahue, he reviewed the crime scene and the autopsy photos as well, and then he reviewed the reports, and he determined that Tony had been manually strangled. John was strangled with something like a chokehold, and Robert was strangled with a belt or a rope, so different methods of being strangled. He said that there was no evidence that the victims had been sexually assaulted, according to the reports, but he could not rule out if oral sex was involved. Which I understand, it's still brutal, but there's not really any way to get that. I mean, there is, but that's beside the point. They also had blunt force trauma, and Bobby appeared to have been cut at least 14 times. They had all been bound and gagged with adhesive tape. There was no evidence of anything relating to a horse stable on any of their bodies. So, horsehair or whatever. I don't know. You would know more than me.
Dander, shavings. I don't know if they'd matched dirt, and horses shed a lot.
Yeah, they've been doing that since, I want to say, the 20s or 30s. It's forensic geology, also trace analysis. So yeah, because of all the witness accounts, they were attempting to place the victims at the Idle Hour stables prior to their deaths, but unfortunately, they were unable to conclusively do that. The police decided to believe Red, and they figured he had no reason to lie anymore, and so they arrested Kenneth in 1994. He was brought to trial in 1995 at the age of 61. There was a prosecution witness who said that they did see Kenneth at the stable at the time of the murders. His defense said that Ken didn't work for Silas at that time, and he only visited the idle hours twice prior to the murders. So again, this is a defense statement. I don't have a clue. At the end of the trial, Judith Anderson said that she had met Ken at that stable August 1955. That means he was officially associated with the location prior to the murders, and he told her that he had worked at the stable on and off for about a year by then. This is the defense saying he's only been there twice, prosecution and the girl saying, no, he worked there. Then there was a man named Roger Sprite, and he testified that he had lived with Ken and his family starting in 1960 or 61 when he was around 11. And according to him, he was forced to sleep in a dog kennel when he refused to have sex with Ken.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's brutal. Oh, and I finally watched that TV show Nosferatu, and it reminded me of the kid that was in the cage.
Didn't I just tell you about that 2 days ago?
Yeah, we finished it.
How many seasons are there? 2? God. It's good. I like that show.
It is all right. First season was definitely better than the second.
Yeah. Christmas Land.
When he refused to have sex with Ken, he would perform oral sex on him anyway, and that was followed by regular sexual intercourse until he turned 18. He said that he lived with Ken on and off for about 20 years. He stated that Ken would often pick up hitchhikers who were in their teens and let him stay at the stables, or it didn't say. It just said in exchange. He said that Ken told him that he would actually have sex with these teen boys that he would pick up. And he said that when he was 15, Ken told him that he had once picked up 3 boys, took them to a barn. He was having sex with 2 of them. One of them walked in, caught him. Ken grabbed him by the throat, accidentally killed him, and then killed the other 2 because they were witnesses. Ken then told Roger that he had a friend come and help him move the bodies, and that friend was Silas Jane. The defense pointed out that he was paid relocation fees for his testimony. And then he was given a reduced sentence on arson charges for him to come and testify to all of this. Then there's Herb Holitz, who testified that he was in a sexual relationship with Ken October 1955, and that he admitted to him that he committed a triple homicide. He said that someone told him to kill the boys, and then he threatened Herb that if he told anyone, Curtis would quote-unquote take care of things. Herb's father was a police officer, but he didn't tell him about this confession because he didn't want his dad to know that he was gay. However, even after his father died in 1980, he still didn't tell anyone until 1995 at the trial. When Red took the stand, he testified that he lived at Sky High Stables from 1968 to 1973 and then on and off. They would pick up teenage hitchhikers. One day in 1968, Red said that Ken admitted that he picked up 3 boys who were hitchhiking, took them to the Idle Hours stable, and strangled them. He said his brother Curtis was the one who hit the boys with a blunt instrument and later furthered this confession by saying that he sent the 2 older boys out riding. He took the youngest into the barn, performed oral sex on him. When it was done, he had one of the other teens in the barn, sent the younger one out, and then the oldest walked in on him, assaulting the second boy, threatened to call the police. So there was a scramble. He called for help from Curtis. And when all was said and done, he said that Ken had moved and had the Idle Hours stable burned down. Remember, this is during the time that Silas was having his stables burned for insurance money. So it could be coincidence, it could be insurance, it could be covering evidence.
Yeah. Huh. Cover up evidence. Oy.
All right, and now we're going to take a quick pause because I want to share with you a trailer from one of our fellow indie podcast duos. Give them a listen, give them a follow, give them a like, and let them know that we're the ones who sent you.
Hello and welcome to Hooked on True Crime, the podcast where we unravel the clues, tie up the loose ends, and when no victim becomes a footnote to somebody else's story, with your host, Ali Downey.
And Sarah Downey. We record an episode together every week where we talk about all aspects of true crime, but especially the cases that might otherwise fall through the cracks and the stories that might otherwise not be told. We also have some pure dead brilliant banter and mention whatever domestic misdemeanors I've committed that week, such as bending all of your teaspoons.
You do that. Hooked on True Crime is a whole lot of true crime stories meticulously researched by Ali.
We've interviewed people like Colin Sutton, who were directly involved with investigations, and we've sat down with people like Ray and Vi Donovan, who turned tragedy into something truly incredible with their campaigning for restorative justice. So, if you want more than opinions and hearsay, I bring the facts while Sarah does crochet.
Give us a listen, anywhere, anytime. And we very much hope to see you next crime.
So back to the story. Here's when the defense started calling their witnesses. Frank Jane, who was Silas's brother. George was the one that was murdered in 1973. Frank was Silas's other brother that testified that Silas did own idle hands from 1950 to 1960, and that the facility was patrolled by a night watchman. There was an employee of the stable that said that he never saw Ken there from 1955 to 1956. Edwin Thomas said that he was the one who had actually lived at Ken's house while George Spry said that he lived there. And he never saw a dog kennel for a human, or Ken's son Mark said that he never saw George sleep in a kennel. The jury only took 40 minutes to find Ken guilty of first-degree murder of all three boys, and he was sentenced to 200 to 300 years in prison. In 2000, he appealed his conviction on the grounds that the search warrant they used was invalid. He was denied a continuance. The court allowed a medical examiner to offer an opinion that the victims could have been sexually molested, that they admitted evidence prejudicially that he was homosexual. They admitted evidence that he picked up hitchhikers and molested them, and that they don't believe that he was found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So on all of those counts, the appeal did happen, and the court agreed that the witnesses presented against the alleged sexual engagement had nothing to do with this case because there was no proof of sexual misconduct against the boys. It's our judicial system. You have to understand that. I don't like it, but I understand it.
Because there's no evidence.
So what does it matter if somebody, alleges that he was sexual with young men? He's a pedo, but it had nothing to do with this murder, evidentiarily speaking.
Right.
So basically, just because they presented people that said that he was a pedo doesn't make him a killer, and his conviction was reversed, remanded for a new trial, which happened in 2002. Where almost everything presented was the same with a couple of additions. Dr. Shakudis, who is another expert in forensic pathology, testified that after she reviewed the reports that John and Tony were killed 2 to 3 hours after eating, which the parents said would have been 1:30 p.m., but it's not very, I don't want to say scientific, it's just not specific. And it was rebutted at the time because digestion's unreliable. Does that make sense?
Why is it unreliable?
Because it would depend on your age, how hungry you were, how much energy you were exerting, how fast your personal body digests food. I can understand if somebody has a super acidic stomach. And not to get too graphic, but think about other people. You eat dinner and some people have to use the facilities within an hour. And then you have other people that would eat dinner and they don't need to use the facilities until the next day. So when you think about it, you can understand people's digestive tracts work differently, and even in the same people.
Right. I always just thought that it was just pushing on the food from the previous meal. It wasn't that food. Unless I've had sushi where I'm like at the sushi bar and I swallow and I'm like, oh, I got to go now. Like that's different. But typically, I thought it like 24 hours before I start seeing familiar items in my toilet. Because yes, we look at our poop.
You should always look at your waste products to determine your amount of health.
My waste products.
I'm trying to not be too graphic, and just a normal conversation between the two of us would be. But that's also why it becomes unreliable. And so even though she was saying most likely was killed at around 3 or 4 p.m., it's not definitive. And again, that would negate all the sightings from the previous trial where they were saying they were seen at night. Long story short, he was reconvicted of all the murders, and he was receiving the same exact sentence.
Good.
And he appealed a second time in 2004, stating that the court erred in refusing to admit exculpatory evidence.
Ooh, exculpatory evidence. Exculpatory evidence is any information or evidence that's favorable to a criminal defendant. It tends to prove their innocence or reduce their culpability. It also can challenge the credibility of the witnesses. So, in other words, the evidence is favorable to the defendant.
Exactly. Because they refused to admit this, he said that he believed Red had perjured himself and that there were prejudicial testimony implicating him in another crime.
Had what himself?
Perjured. He lied on the stand, and it's a crime in itself, and he could be arrested. I don't know why I do this with my hands all the time.
Politician hands.
So, zeroing in on that exculpatory evidence, it showed that a woman named Joyce Saxon was not allowed to testify because of hearsay evidence that her deceased ex-husband, Jack Railing, he confessed to the murders to her. And there was a second person that could have been brought to trial and or convicted for what he was convicted of. But they wouldn't allow her to testify.
Okay. Prosecutors were just like focused on this one guy and not willing to take on other evidence.
But it was because of hearsay evidence, although 90% of what we're talking about was already hearsay evidence. They were saying that they heard Ken talk about committing these murders. I don't understand why that's any different.
Right.
And again, I'm not advocating for Ken. I'm advocating in the justice system.
Yeah, do your job.
So he said that a few months after the boys were killed, Joyce and Jack were having an argument, and she asked him if he committed the murders, and he said, yeah. And the reason that she didn't testify at the second trial was that a psychiatrist stated her physical and mental health prevented her from giving, I'm answering my own question. She wasn't going to be the one that testified at trial, and that makes it hearsay evidence. I apologize. I write these a while ago. Wrote. So I'm learning along with all of you. Anyway, because she wasn't allowed to testify at trial, she wasn't allowed to give an accurate testimony because she had memory impairment, allegedly. This diagnosis was submitted in an unsworn form, however, and therefore the court said there was no reason that she could not have testified at the 2002 trial. They thought it was exculpatory evidence, but the courts believed there was no reason that she couldn't have testified. It is what it is. Further, we now remember George is the one who was murdered, and it is believed George knew about what his brother did helping the disposal of the bodies in 1955. And that's the reason he was killed, not just the feud with his brother.
Yeah, because his brothers were jerks, weren't they?
But he was killed in 1973.
Yeah, that was before.
And this happened in 1955. So again, I would just be remiss not to bring any of it up, if you will. The reason that they thought George knew is because, according to Marion, his wife, George told her that he had information about the murders and Silas's involvement. George said it was enough evidence to send Silas to the chair. So Marion encouraged him to go to the police. George said he thought that the cops were being paid by Silas, so he never reported it. Instead, George wrote a letter that Marion was supposed to give to the police if anything happened to him. And George told his wife that he changed his mind because the letter would bring shame to the family, and the letter was not turned over. There's no proof of this letter having ever existed. Kenneth Hansen died in the Pontiac Correctional Institute in 2007 at the age of 74, maintaining his innocence the whole time.
Which most people do.
Absolutely. Now we're going to get into the super far-fetched theory that holds absolutely no water, but some people say that John Wayne Gacy at the age of 13 was the one to kill all three boys and move their bodies because they all lived within 1 mile of each other and they all bowled.
Oh, please. They all what? Bowled?
Yeah, bowling. Pins.
Yeah, bowling.
So yet another case that is rumored to involve Silas Jane is the disappearance of Patty Blau, 19, Renee Bruhl, 19, and Ann Miller, 22. They had all gone to the beach July 2nd, 1966 at the Indiana Dunes State Park on Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan is that massive lake that has waves and everything, right?
Yeah, it looks like a palm tree. I've been there one time, not to the dunes, but I've been to, I think, does Minnesota touch it? I don't know. It was huge.
You're asking the wrong person. I've never been there.
I looked it up and it looks like I thought it was on the ocean. That's how like the dunes, it looks like South Carolina. Nice white. But then when I Google mapped it, I was like, oh, this is South Lake Michigan. This is not supposed to be here. It's pretty.
Yeah, I thought Lake Michigan had waves and everything that people could surf. Yeah.
Yeah. Monsoons and all those things, I'm sure.
On that morning, Anne drove her Buick to pick up Patty, telling Patty's mother that they would be home early in the evening because Renee, who was joining them, had to go and make dinner for her husband. The good old days where the wifeys would rush home to cook for their men. Love my husband. I'm not going to rush home to cook dinner for him.
Mine cooks for me.
Shut up, you spoiled brat.
But I used to hurry home. I wanted to be home first back in the day.
Why's that?
Just to be home. I didn't like him being home alone. I felt like I'd always be home first.
That's so cute.
Yeah, I don't know. Just the way I felt.
My husband and I get to carpool almost every day, so I don't have to rush. We get home at the same time. All right, the girls arrived at the park around 10 a.m. Renee had completed a one-year medical technology course after she graduated high school. Patty was a great swimmer with a passion for horses, owning a thoroughbred named Hank, and he actually had just won a race. Then Anne was also a great swimmer. She worked as a horse exerciser at the Oak Brook Polo Club, and it was through their love of horses that her and Patty became friends because they boarded their horses at the same stable. The girls were last seen by a couple on the beach near them because they had left their belongings on the beach and climbed into a 14 to 16-foot blue and white boat with a blue interior around noon that day. The couple noticed the girls never returned because their belongings were still there. They decided to report this observation to the park ranger around dusk that day, and they described the man who was driving the boat. He had a full head of dark curly hair, and he was in his early 20s and well tanned. On July 4th, Patty's father called the park superintendent, Bill Svedick, to report that his daughter and two friends had gone to the dunes on the 2nd and never returned home. There's not really a report as to why they waited 2 days. Maybe because they were adults?
Yeah, maybe they were camping.
But one of them was supposed to go home to cook dinner for her husband, so she would have been expected that night. The ranger decided to check the belongings that were left on the beach, and he found Patty's wallet, keys, and clothes, in addition to the clothes and purses belonging to the two other women. Patty's car was still in the parking lot. The ranger told her dad not to worry because they were probably just having a good holiday weekend and they'd turn up. Again, this is 1966. This was not true because none of the three women have ever been seen again.
Did they find their bodies? No.
Still, there was a full search for the girls in the 6-mile stretch of beach. They searched the water, and a bit later in the week, the girls were, according to a witness, seen on a second beach later that same day. They were approached by another man who took them in a cabin cruiser with other men on board. That sighting was never confirmed. Eyewitness testimony. We know how that is. Police looked through the girls' belongings and found a letter that Renee had written to her husband of 15 months. He was a 21-year-old accounting student. She was asking for a divorce. Even though she was going to go home that day to cook for him, they found the letter, and she said she wanted a divorce because he never had time for her. The family said that the letter was actually written a couple weeks previous, and she didn't really want a divorce. She never sent it or gave it to him. I mean, I've done that in my youth, written those kind of letters. You just want to get it out and you never give it to the person. So it doesn't count.
I have not done that. No.
Why not? Like journaling.
Maybe in a diary, but I would never written a note. Like, just in case.
Yeah, me neither. Crickets. That was in my youth, though, like high school days. In March that same year, Patty went missing. Police noticed that she had a facial injury that she said came about because she was in trouble with a quote-unquote horse syndicate people.
Okay.
Her sister Janice said it might be possible that she was pregnant and she was missing because it was alleged that she was in a relationship with a married man, and also was alleged to have been pregnant when she was missing, and also allegedly dating a married man. Again, I don't believe any of this. That's up for debate. I'm just trying to present everything that's out there.
We have no bodies to see if she was pregnant.
Exactly. And nobody's come forward to say, yeah, I was dating him, or medical records, nothing. And now Silas comes into the picture because all three had ridden at the Tricolor Stables that was owned by the Jane brothers. They also had George and Silas's phone numbers in their belongings that were left on the beach that day. Well, keep in mind, Kenneth Hansen was the only one that allegedly had assaulted and killed the boys.
They weren't little boys, though. The wrong gender. Still bad men.
So it is theorized, speculated, alleged that the girls may have seen the planting of the bomb of Cheryl. Remember how she got into George's vehicle and it blew up with her in it? And that could explain the problems with the quote-unquote horse syndicate people in the facial injury that Patty had, like threats.
They're killing off witnesses. Allegedly.
Allegedly. I'm going to keep saying allegedly. I don't want to get sued. I'm broke. So the next theory is based on the fact that the allegations that there was 2 unmarried pregnant women and they were not considered to be good things to be unmarried and pregnant in 1966. And it was known that there was a couple named Helen and Frank Largo who performed back alley abortions on their houseboat in Lake Michigan.
Dang.
Mm-hmm. Again, this is 1966, so it's illegal to have an abortion. It's believed that something went wrong. Either one or both went wrong, and whoever was left couldn't be a witness. Who knows?
It's wild.
Another theory is that all 3 drowned, which is not uncommon in Lake Michigan because of the strong currents. But unlike other drowning victims, they never washed ashore. They've never been found. And it seems highly unlikely that all 3, 2 of which were known to be great swimmers, not one of them has ever come ashore or nothing floated or no trace.
How deep is do we know how deep Lake Michigan is?
I don't know. You want to look that up while I keep going?
Yeah.
Our final theory is that they all went missing voluntarily because all 3 seem to have turmoils in their lives. Unmarried and pregnant, divorced from a husband. Nobody that's associated with this trio believes that any of this is true. Did we find out how deep it is?
Yes. The average depth is about 279 feet, but reaches a maximum depth of around 925 feet, making it the deepest of Great Lakes located within the United States.
Impressive.
So I bet divers could not get down there.
No, but that's assuming that they dumped them in the deepest part. I know that divers can get down to 200 feet.
Right.
Well, no matter the theories that surface, we may never know what happened to them because there's no confession, no bodies. So if anyone has any information out there about what happened to those 3 girls, please contact the police and let them know. I know it was 1966, but there are people still alive from 1966.
Yeah.
We're going to go ahead and end it there for today because I do have another story to tell you, and it has to be its own episode. So that pin from the beginning, we got another one.
All right.
Hopefully you all enjoyed this. Hopefully you want to continue the series. Share it with your friends. Get us some listens out there. Bye.
Bye, y'all.